Facebook, so you'll all be able to catch up with them later and read them through again if you want to. Later in the year, I'll be coming to you all again, asking for your help to start the process in anger, which Andrew no doubt will tell us more about.
It won't be in anger, it will be from heartfelt delight, everybody. Hi everybody, my name is Andrea Pellegram. I am a planning consultant. I know I don't sound like I should know anything about the English planning system, but I've been doing it here since 1987, so sorry about the way I sound, it just never went away. I'm originally from Seattle, but now I'm actually a British citizen. So I've done quite a few neighborhood plans. I've had quite a long period in working as a town planner. I've worked in strategic planning in London and waste planning at Surrey County Council. And oh my goodness, what a great turnout here. And I was Director of Development Services at Cotswold District. So I've actually got quite a long experience of the town planning system from all aspects. I'm spending the end of my career really just working with communities because I think neighborhood planning is such an important thing. And it does genuinely provide the community with an opportunity to help shape the policies that then determine the decisions about planning applications. And most people don't think about planning until they actually want to do a planning application, then it's like, oh my God, what is this? Or if it's because it's the neighboring development, or as in the case of this village, you're getting a strategic allocation where Swindon Council wants to put houses here. And all of a sudden you feel out of control and like it's all being done to you and you feel a bit like victims. And that's what neighborhood planning really is supposed to help you do. Is you can't make things that you don't like go away, but you can certainly do a lot to influence the design of the final thing. And that's really what we're hoping to achieve with this neighborhood plan. So I've got a presentation here. I'm just going to explain a little bit to you about neighborhood planning. And then we're going to do some exercises where you guys have to say your opinion. So I want you to not be polite English people. I want you, when we get to that point, I want you to say your... Good, okay, that's great. I want you to sort of shout out what you think, because this is a really important kickoff session where we actually, this is the main session where we're going to hear what the community wants. So I'm so happy to see so many of you here. The whole process should take, so there are many, many stages to it. The whole thing from beginning to end is probably between 2 to 3 years, depending on how complicated things are. And people get very frustrated because it takes so long. But if you think about a planning policy determines how something is built, which means that you're actually talking about somebody's property, you're talking about their building, you're talking about the money they have to spend to deliver something that you might think is important. So it's really important that the neighborhood plan policies are just right, and so they have to go through quite a lot of consultation and quite a lot of correction and amendment, and that's why it takes so long. The creative part of the process is the part at the beginning where we hear what the community wants, and we work with you to identify some of the best solutions to this housing estate and other planning matters. And then we write the neighborhood plan, and then it gets quite bureaucratic all the way to the end when you finally get to vote on the final subject. So I'll give that little presentation now. I'll take questions if you have questions about neighborhood planning, and then we'll launch into the exercises. And we're hoping to finish by 9 o'clock. So thank you all for coming here tonight. If you want to leave early because it's late, that's absolutely fine. Participate as much as you like. And just so happy that so many of you came right before Christmas in horrible weather. Thank you very much. It's really a packed room here today. So what is a neighborhood plan? It's a document that sets out planning policies for the neighborhood area, and these planning policies are used to decide whether to approve planning applications. So if somebody submits a planning application, if it's for your extension or it's for this 42-house development that's being proposed, you have to prove that your application meets the policies. So the neighborhood plan prepares policies that are then used by the case officer to decide whether or not an aspect of the design is suitable or not. It's written by the local community, and you're the people who actually love the area. I'm sure the Swindon Borough planners are all lovely people, but they don't know this area as much as you do. And that's why it's so empowering that you can use your local experience and your local knowledge to actually prepare these policies. Oops. Oh my goodness, it's just skipped forward five slides. So it's a powerful tool that ensures that the community gets the right type of development in the right place. That's actually all a quote from an organization called Locality. Locality is a charity that basically administers significant levels of funding from the government. So the Department of Leveling Up in Communities and Housing, but I'm sure I got the words in the wrong order. But it used to be MHCLG, now it's DHULC or something back then. Sorry, I thought. Anyway, so the government gives quite a lot of money to Locality, who then administers grant funding, which is what the parish council will be using to pay for this process, so it's not coming out of what your preset. And also, they can get a lot of technical support, so a lot of, we're probably going to need a strategic environmental assessment. We might need a habitats regulation assessment. I don't know what other assessments we might need. So what I'm saying is that it's a very rigorous, thorough process, and you are not paying for it. So that's the important thing. And it does take a lot of work as well. So it's all coming out of the Localism Act 2011 and subsequent legislation and regulations. And it is super, super bureaucratic. So everything has to be done correctly. And that's why they hired me as a planning consultant to actually take you through the process. Because all the words say that it's all lovely and it's all about what the community wants. But I promise you, it's all about planning regulations and planning law. Really, that's what it's about. So there are many benefits. Once it's adopted, and that's called made, once the plan is made, it does take precedence over the other policies. So in this parish, your neighborhood plan policies are more important than the Swindon Council policies. So if there's a nuance that shows up in your neighborhood plan that is absent in the Swindon plan, then that nuance is what is used in the decision. All of the stakeholders consider it to be a legitimate thing, so that includes the housing developers or anybody else who's preparing a planning application. It's not just some nice to have thing, it's a real part of the planning process. And the parish council will receive more community infrastructure levy as a result of having a neighborhood plan. So normally, community infrastructure levy is like a tax on all development. So any planning application, you have to pay community infrastructure levy. Now, without a neighborhood plan, the parish council automatically gets 15% for anything that's raised within the parish boundary, but that goes up to 25%. So that means that the parish council will have a little bit extra money to actually implement some of this stuff that we'll be identifying as necessary. Can everyone hear me okay? And I think the government is giving a very clear message that neighborhood plans are here to stay. Who knows?
Blurred.
Oh,
Your glasses.
oh, my glass. Oh, how exciting. Right. And I do believe that I think we had sort of, you probably don't remember, there was lots of talk in the press a year and a half ago about reform of the planning system, and it was all going to be put in the developer's favor. And I think the government decided that that really was very unpopular. So I don't know what reforms we're going to be getting, but in my heart, I do feel like neighborhood planning is here to stay, or here to stay certainly for the medium term, and is therefore really worth doing. But neighborhood plans are only as good as the policies that they contain. So you can have a made neighborhood plan that has absolutely no effect on decision making. And again, that's why they've hired me, because I can actually help write policies that have a bit of bite and actually result in something that you want to see. So a neighborhood plan can add detail to the existing policy that Swindon produces and the emerging policy. And it's really the emerging policy. That means that the policies that they're working on that they haven't adopted yet, those are the policies that we're really going to be looking at here, because those are the policies that are going to give you the biggest impact. And the neighborhood plan will alert any developer coming forward, and whether that's somebody who's preparing a small planning application or a large planning application, what you as a community need and want, so that the parish council can negotiate on planning applications when they're being determined to make sure that they get the best deal for you. And the way that planning works is that you have to have the policy first. The policy has to be adopted before you can use it in decision making. So the parish council might argue that they like something or they don't like something about a planning application that comes forward, but unless it's actually in a policy, it's just words. If it refers to a policy that's adopted, that's gone through this rigorous process, then the parish council can actually make recommendation to the case officer, so in the planning department, that sticks and has meaning. So it's slow, but it's worth doing. And it also will then help the parish council prioritize its infrastructure requirements. So as we go through this, we might find some things that maybe planning applications can't pay for, because there are very strict rules about how you leverage money out of a planning application. But the parish council will be getting extra money from the sale and from having more parishioners. So that will then help them understand what needs to be done, what's the most important. So it's really a good thing. It's a very good thing. But there are some things that it cannot do. It cannot prevent allocated development from coming forward. So it is not the tool for trying to fight Swindon Council about that proposed housing scheme. It cannot do that. It must be silent on that. It must just accept that that housing scheme is coming forward. It cannot conflict or change any of the policies in the Swindon plan. So if the Swindon plan will set the framework, and all the neighborhood plan can do is work within that framework. But there's still quite a bit of scope for that. It cannot deal with anything that's not material to planning. So there's all sorts of things that people, you might say some stuff tonight about traffic speeds or grass verge cutting and maintenance and stuff. That is not part of planning, and therefore we can't put it in here. Doesn't mean that it can't be taken forward by the parish council. It just can't be taken forward in the neighborhood plan. And it cannot override the powers of the statutory undertakers. Who are they? They're like Environment Agency, Natural England, Historic England, many parts of Swindon Council. So there are quite a few things that it cannot do. So I've looked at the draft local plan, and I just realized I brought a copy of this that I can read. I mean, I can't even read that. My goodness. Does anyone see a pink folder? Oh my goodness.
Here's my pink folder.
Right. I have a copy here that I can read. Sorry, I should have thought that one through. So this is the thing, really. This is a policy being proposed in the draft local plan review. That's the Swindon plan that they're preparing to go to the period 2036. So this neighborhood plan will have the same period because that's the plan that we're aiming to be in conformity with. So this policy proposal, and it's a proposal until the local plan is adopted, is for land east of Hudson Road, policy LA 22. And you probably all know it by heart, but I'll just read out the main points. It talks about a 42 dwelling, it's identified a piece of land, we'll look at the map in a minute, 42 dwellings, and then it sets out a lot of criteria that has to be included in the design of the scheme. A single point of access, pedestrian connection to the existing footway, high quality entrance with no development near the southwest corner, taking account of the adjacent wildlife site, at least 0.3 hectares of usable public open space, has to relate to Sus-Trans Route 45. They want a public art installation and a bench and picnic area with an interpretation board on the history of Chiselden, a local equipped play space, and pedestrian connectivity to the village and all the many amenities you have. Gosh, you've got a lot of pubs here. I'm sure many places are jealous. I was telling the chairman, I live in Cirencester, and in the Cotswolds, most of the villages are now completely dead. Just nothing left. There's just houses lovely houses. Oh, they're so beautiful. But there's no place you can walk for, go to the pub, you can't walk to get a pint of milk or some newspaper. You can't get anything in most Cotswold villages. So, you know, you're really lucky to have as much as you do, and you need to work hard to protect and preserve that, because once it's gone forever. You know, once something's turned into a residential house, it will never become a shop again. You've lost it. So, this is, I don't know if you can see it. Again, you probably all know what I'm talking about. This red line is just the line where the piece of land where all of this is supposed to happen, 42 houses. So when I was looking at this, I thought, well, what could the neighborhood plan possibly do? So one thing that's absolutely obvious to me is that we could use the neighborhood plan to prepare what's called a master plan for the site, where we actually interpret all of these requirements and say what's going to happen where and how it's going to happen, and you can even include the words that you want to go on the sign that goes in the picnic area. You know, you can go to that much detail. So you, as a community, we can describe and define exactly what all of that means. And that's quite a lot, actually. So you,
Do you mind if you stand outside the group so that we can...
oh, I'm sorry. You wouldn't be able to read it anyway. Oh, I think you can maybe, do you want to move?
No, it's not the labels.
Is that better? Is that better?
Not for us over here, so.
I'll just move around. Sorry, pillars are never good, are they? Pillars are never good. So basically what I'm saying is that you can have a policy in the neighborhood plan that's literally a master plan policy for this site, and it interprets exactly what LA 22 means. And all the way down, you can go to so much detail. You can actually specify the nature, the species of the trees that are planted, if that's something. So, for instance, I'm doing quite a few neighborhood plans around Tewksbury. There used to be a lot of orchards, apple pear orchards down there. So in those neighborhood plans, we specified that we would like apple and pear trees to be planted, you know, instead of conifers or something that's completely alien to that area. So you can go into an amazing amount of detail with these things, and it's really helpful, and the community will feel more of a sense of ownership when these new schemes come on board. And I'm not making small of the fact that you don't all want it to happen. I expect that a lot of you don't want it to happen, but if it does happen, it's much better for you to have some control over how that works. Oh, look at me now. I'm sorry, I'll kind of move around here. So, a neighborhood plan is supposed to set out clear policies on what infrastructure is required. So, we can also set out specifically what the requirements are, set out what kind of cycle paths you want, how many benches are supposed to be provided. You can even have, you know, a picture of the kind of bench you want or what kind of play area. And, you know, I think developers always just go for like toddler play areas. Many of the places I work, there's nothing for teenagers, absolutely nothing for teenagers. So toddlers, yeah, they've got lots and lots of fun little bouncy things and things to climb, but there's nothing for teenagers. So if, for instance, we identify that there's a shortage of play space for a certain sector of your young population, then, you know, you can specify that in here. If you're like any place else that I've been lately, people want to have sustainable development. They want to have zero carbon development. I came here in the dark, and though I just really enjoyed all your Christmas lights, I couldn't actually see your houses. So I haven't come for my site visit yet. But from what I hear, it's a lovely place. And there's lots of old thatched cottages, and it's really quite lovely. And I've also heard, you know, that you don't want to have sort of bog standard development, and that's not very nice, because it's the same in Manchester as it is in Luton. You know, they all look exactly the same, and they're completely featureless. So you want to have something that reflects your local character, and that's absolutely fine. If we can define some design criteria, that's something that we can put in the neighborhood plan. This policy, LA 22, and other policies in the Swindon plan talk a lot about footways and cycle routes and sus-trans routes and all of that. So that's all fine for them to say that, but Swindon Borough doesn't know what routes need to be improved and how they need to be improved. So what a neighborhood plan can do is actually identify what improvements are required so that when a planning proposal comes forward, you can make the developer pay for some of those improvements. Because I notice that you've got very small and windy roads here. So what you don't want is a whole bunch more cars driving on your little roads. You want people to actually walk if they can. I hope some of you guys walked tonight, even though the weather was horrid and it got dark at about 3 o'clock today. But, if you don't actually make provision to walk and cycle safely, people will not do it. You have to give them at least the option to do it. So it's all about gathering lots of evidence about what is actually necessary. Local green spaces, I know that I looked on a map and I saw that you've got quite a few nice little green areas that you probably want to retain in the future. So we can protect those. I saw playing fields, a recreation ground, and some smaller green spaces. So we can certainly work on that. Biodiversity, this policy talks about a wildlife site. I'm sure that you have knowledge of important green spaces, important species and habitats that you want to see improved. And we now have the Environment Act, which requires that all development makes a 10% net improvement to biodiversity. If you don't define how that improvement is supposed to be made, then it's just up to the applicant, okay? And they could do something that the community thinks is inappropriate, but they can say, well, it's a plant, so, I'm gonna say these palm trees are improving the biodiversity. Well, palm trees aren't going to produce they're not native here, so no local species are gonna thrive in a palm tree. So you can set out how that should work, and also, if all development is supposed to give a 10% improvement to biodiversity, and if they can't do it on their site, like let's say if a SPAR wants to do something, how are they going to do 10% biodiversity improvement on the site? You can also allocate a site somewhere else and say that's where you can do your biodiversity, because they don't have to deliver it on the site. So
can I ask on that quickly? How do they track that? How do they validate that it's a 10%?
So there's a methodology and a metric that's online, and
Okay.
There is a way to prove it. So that's the end of my presentation, because I wanted to get on to the real thing where I use the flip chart, and we'll turn this all off. Does anybody have any questions about the process, or how long it takes, or anything?
I do.
Go on then.
Sorry, someone else raised their hand first.
So does the plan have any influence on how many affordable housing the developer has to put up, or is that purely up to them?
No, it's not purely up to them. So affordable housing is really important, and with the percentage of affordable housing, you should probably stick with what Swindon Borough wants. And I'm sorry, I can't remember. I think it's 30%. I'll have to look it up. When we actually get down to it, I'll know absolutely everything. So they have to produce affordable housing. The question is then, what kind of affordable housing? And if you feel tonight, and after I talk to the steering group, if you feel tonight that that's a really important issue, you can actually have what's called an exception site where it's 100% affordable housing. So if you feel like, and this is very common, that people in lovely villages, all the young people have to leave because they couldn't possibly afford to stay. And I do this a lot, so what we'll have to do is gather some evidence about what your local housing need might be, and then come up with some ways that you might be able to increase the amount of affordable housing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
My question relates, you said it's a fixed policy. Is that reviewed on a semi-regular basis to make sure it still fits the needs, or is it just as other policies change that it gets reviewed?
The affordable housing?
No, the entire neighbourhood planning policy that you
Oh, okay. So the Swindon Council local plan is required in planning legislation and in the National Planning Policy Framework to be reviewed every 5 years. And they're supposed to do a monitoring statement every year to make sure that they have enough housing land availability. It all gets really technical. But basically, government wants to have 300,000 houses built per annum across the country. And right now, we're at about half of that. So the government wants to have twice as many houses being built as are being built now, every year. So planning authorities are under constant pressure, and that's why you're getting 42 houses here, constant pressure to keep finding additional sites. So they have to do that every 5 years. And it takes about 5 years to get the plan from starting off to getting it past its local plan inspection. So that's what it takes 5 years. There's no requirement for neighborhood plans to ever be reviewed, but once the new, so we'll be preparing this in conformity with the plan that they're working on now, because we'll be finished just about when that one gets adopted. So then that neighborhood plan will be in place, it will be good for about 5 years. And then once that plan is adopted, reviewed and adopted again, then it becomes out of date, so it's kind of useless then. So,
Can I ask a question about other sites? Is there, this Hodson Road site at the moment, are there other sites already in discussion that we could be asked to take more homes within a reasonable period of time?
so you could take extra homes, you can always add extra homes. If you want to find an alternative site,
No, I meant in addition, so.
yeah, you can have a housing sites in addition, yes. So if you wanted to have a site that was just for affordable housing for something else, then yes, you absolutely
What if
can.
we don't want, can the council force us to take more homes?
The only
if
way they
want
can
to?
force you to take homes is through the strategic allocation,
Right,
which
okay.
is where you're at now,
And when's the next time they can do that?
in 5 years.
Right, okay, so it's we're good for 5 years with this.
Once we get this one, you'll be good for 5 years, yeah. I think you raise your hand first and then I'll get to you.
Is it possible to exclude greenfield sites and use more redevelopment of existing sites within the coverage of the village rather than using greenfield sites? Can you include that in the plan?
Yes, you can. So that's called a development boundary. So I believe that there is a development boundary, but if not, we can try to draw one if the planning authority is willing, because that's kind of on the borderline. Is it a strategic policy, which we're not allowed to do, or is it a local policy? But we can probably negotiate that.
There is a rule.
There is-
There.
Okay, so there is a development boundary, so that needs to be adjusted. So the neighborhood plan is able to do that. And then you can have a policy that says what you do with the land inside. So you can have a special policy about infill development and that garden development and all that sort of thing. And then you could say, and if you do have this development, then you can't add to parking on the roads and it has to do this and it has to do that. So you can do that.
Yeah, thank you. What's the scope of this discussion? Is it only the area of 42 houses which have been agreed?
The scope, sorry, I should have made that clear. The scope is the entirety of the parish. So the neighborhood area will be the entirety of the parish. And any planning policy is up for discussion, okay? So I was just saying that the 42 houses is probably your most pressing matter, but anything. So, but let me just reiterate. So planning policies are only effective if there's going to be a planning application. So if there's something that will never get a planning application, you probably don't need a very detailed policy because it's never going to be used. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Could I just ask, from your experience, what has been the chief problem for parish councils where they've agreed a neighbourhood plan and yet has not been upheld? Development has still occurred.
Are you members of WALPA?
Pardon?
What, are you members of WALPA? You're not in Wiltshire, but it does have, so there's the matter of the 5-year housing land supply. This is where we get really technical, I'm sorry. But I told you that the government wants to have 300,000 homes built per annum, and they put all sorts of very challenging policies in the National Planning Policy Framework requiring this land to be delivered. You're seeing it here. There's all sorts of ways that land isn't coming forward, And if that happens, and there's no what's called a 5-year housing land supply, then you can get speculative housing development that's permitted, even if the planning authority objects to it. I'm trying to turn these off, but can you turn that off for me? So I used to work for Honda, and I did the Stratton St. Margaret neighborhood plan, and at that time there wasn't a 5-year housing land supply in Swindon. Is there one now, do you know? Right, okay. So for those of you who don't know everything about planning, which is probably all of you, in the case where there's no 5-year housing land supply, it's just a technicality, okay? It's just a technicality, and I'm happy to explain how it works if anybody wants to stay, but it's really technical, so you probably don't want to hear it all. Then you can get speculative housing development. So even if your neighborhood plan draws a development boundary and says, yes, we're going to accommodate the housing policy LA 22 or whatever it's called, yeah, LA 22, even if you do everything that you're supposed to do, it's still possible in the absence of a 5-year housing land supply for somebody to come forward and put 12 houses on a field, and there's very little you can do about it. And that's just the way it is. And it's very frustrating, but every place in the country is in that position. If you allocate a site, if you do allocate anything in addition, so anything that you want to allocate, then there's another get out which says that if you allocate a site, you only have to approve a 3-year housing land supply. So if you're worried about it, you can allocate land for a couple of houses, and then you've kind of gotten out of that position where there's no 5-year housing land supply. So it's something worth thinking about if you're worried that it's going to happen here.
Yeah, well, I do have a quality of concern actually in terms of, central government diktats with regard to relaxation of planning regulations.
They haven't relaxed anything yet. And I think all of that bold talk we had 2 years ago about how the planning system was going to be transformed is not going to happen. Because actually, it's a pretty effective system. It's very frustrating for everybody. And it's slow, but it's effective. And the fact that you live in a beautiful village that's compact with green all around is testament to the fact that the planning system works. Because I come from America, where it's just building everywhere, and it's really pretty horrid. And the system here works. So,
You can lot more space in America than we've got.
well, they're filling it up with a bunch of junk really fast.
I think also, there's something on our side is the fact that we live slap bang in the middle of an area of outstanding natural beauty, which does give us power to our elbow. And my understanding, please don't take this as fact, but my understanding is that the 5-year housing plan will be satisfied by the time we get this in place. So, around about
Yes,
the
and
time.
the AONB is only going to be helpful.
Yes.
Because it's actually one of the sort of get-out clauses in the National Planning Policy Framework that is in AONB, that development that it's not appropriate to apply this rule in the AONB. But you still get development in the AONB. It still happens, and the AONB Management Board doesn't object to everything. So I still recommend that you do have policies, even if you're in the AONB.
Oh, no, I agree. But I also think that there has to be some organic growth to allow the village to keep breathing.
That's right, and
to a degree.
I'm just starting another neighborhood plan in a place called Grafton, which is in Wiltshire. Same thing, and they're just stagnating because they can't have anything. So if you want to have some more development than the 42, yes, you absolutely can. And there's quite a detailed process that we have to go through to do that, but I've done it a number of times. That's not a problem.
To what extent can the parish council influence the Swindon Borough Council when applying for 42 houses to deal with the infrastructure that's going to support these houses? Because at the moment, Hodson Road is a through road for earthline lorries and all sorts of other lorries, and hammering through there almost all day long. Now, you've got another 42 houses we're going to use Hodson Road. To what extent can the parish council say, hey, we can't have that, because it's going to be an accident. We need speed cameras, we need speed bumps, or we need something.
So do you remember I said that the neighborhood plan can only deal with things that are material to the planning system? That's one of the things that's not material. So that's all the Highways Authority, and so it's all Swindon Council responsible for that. And it's not planning. So we can raise concerns, and the most effective way to do it is to engage with the Highways Authority, if they will, because the bottom line is, since austerity, there are not enough officers in local government to do the job. There's just not enough bums on seats. So it's really hard to actually get anyone from the Highways Authority to engage with you. But once they start, then they can start putting their own requirements on new development. So that's the way to do it. But it's a great way to start the conversation with the neighborhood plan.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Has the land actually been purchased, or is it still?
I have absolutely no idea. So the way that it works is Swindon Borough Council did a call for sites saying, give us your sites. And somebody who owned this land put it forward and made a compelling case that this site was better than all the other sites in the area, and that's the one that was chosen. So it's got nothing to do with the landowner, but they wouldn't have allocated the site if they weren't certain it would be built within 5 years.
There's no planning application gone in yet.
No, there can't be, because it hasn't been allocated. As far as that land is concerned, right now it's probably countryside.
I've got two points. Just on the materiality of stuff, I think it'd be helpful to explain what is material common sense, the use of that.
Okay,
Paragraph 24.
there's a very long list of things that are material to planning, and I'll try to remember it as best as I can. So it's all the national policy, the legislation, the law, there's a lot of high court decisions about planning, there's a lot of planning inspectors' decisions, reports, there's circulars and advisory notes and ministerial letters, so that's all material if it's about planning. And then it's about noise, fumes, privacy, character, trees, traffic impacts, but not traffic management. It's a really niche kind of traffic definition, because it's ultimately the Highways Authority that has to identify if something is unsafe or not. Did I say privacy, overlooking, enclosure, fences?
Loss of light?
Loss of light, that kind of thing. So basically, planning is about two things, and two things only. It's about land use, which is what you do on a piece of land. So this is, I'm sorry, I can't remember the use class, but this is a hotel. And if this were to become a set of apartment buildings, it would have a completely different impact on the village, wouldn't it? Because different traffic patterns, and there wouldn't be deliveries, there'd be avocado deliveries instead, and it'd all be different. So it's a different use class, and it's just a kind of a crude way for the planning system to actually decide how it's going to deal with all these different things. So there's land use, and there's development, and development is actually building things and tearing things down and adding to things and painting things and whatever. So development is actually doing something to a building or building something, and land use is the activity that happens on the land. So that's what's material to the planning system, is just those two things, land use and development.
Will the landowner be forced to sell?
The landowner has already made it clear to Swindon Council that they want to have the land be developed. They don't have to sell it, they can build 42 houses on it and charge everybody rent if they wanted to, or, I don't know what. The 10-year arrangement's not part of the process, it's not material to planning, just building the houses to a certain required standard. So they don't have to sell, no. But they would have had to prove that they wanted to develop the site.
In the old days, the local authority could sell the purchase notice on the land.
Yeah, compulsory purchase orders, they're not used anymore, it's just
Too expensive.
too expensive,
Much too expensive.
yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on, because I need you to talk and not me. I'm gonna take a off my Apple Watch, because every time I wave my hand around, it says I'm doing a step, and I'm gonna start getting notifications in a minute saying, oh, well done, you're doing a walk. So, I like to keep things really simple when I do these exercises, so I just want you guys to tell me what you like and what you don't like. So we're going to do a SWOT analysis. That's the first thing we're going to do. Then that will kind of help me understand how you feel about where you live. And then we're going to just sort of talk about what kind of policies you think should go in the neighborhood plan. And then at the end, we're going to just quickly do a little bit of work on the vision for Chiseldon. And the vision is basically, you say, in 2036, we want Chiseldon to be a place where ... and then you tell me what that is. Because the vision is really what we're trying to get to, and that's what the policies are supposed to help us achieve. So that's why you start with a vision, so you figure out, okay, so how am I going to get from here to there? Okay, I need a policy that does this, that, and the other. Okay, does everybody understand that? So strengths. What do you like about living here? So this pen's what I said, give me new pens. And look, it's already going out. But I brought some more pens. Okay, strengths. What is it that you like about this place?
The fact that it's not overdeveloped.
Yeah.
How do you define overdeveloped?
Just down the road, Bradbury Park.
Bradbury?
Housing.
Can I make a point about Bradbury Park? The council were totally against that it was rejected at planning. It was taken to appeal, we had no control. And then we have no control, and I think that's something we have to be always very aware of, is if we say no, that's what will happen, then we lose total control. Whereas if we're sensible about it and sometimes say yes, then we have a finger in and we can actually make sure we get what we want. So we're not being done to, we are being part of whatever's happening.
That's such a good point, yeah, because you never know when something bad is going to happen. So that's what this is here to help you anticipate and be prepared to fight.
So, are you actually saying we could specify the design of the houses?
You could certainly have very strong design directions.
So, if we wanted 46 thatched cottages, would that be possible?
Okay.
We've got factories down there, all right down.
If you can prove that a thatched cottage can be delivered at the same price as a Whitney Hall, sorry folks, but there's a whole part of planning that's all about viability. I'm not going to explain it tonight, but yeah, if you can prove that it's viable to do thatched cottages, yep, you absolutely can.
So that means you could specify flats, you could specify bungalows, you could specify anything you wanted in a mixed
provided it was viable to deliver, and you'd have to do some work to prove that, yeah.
And that's something that would be potentially controllable by the parish council?
Well, it would be a policy in your neighborhood plan that has to be, used in the preparation of the design of the scheme, yeah. But I'm telling you, it has got to be viable to deliver, so you cannot put policies in the plan that are just so expensive that nobody will ever do it, because you won't get away with that.
And prefabricated houses?
Prefabricated, you can say for sustainability reasons, if you've got a justification that prefabricated houses are preferred.
So is there a benchmark then for to make a property viable in terms of the number of people occupying it and the potential cost of the property?
Okay, so the number of people occupying it has already been determined because they've come up with the number 42. Wasn't that from Hitchhiker's Guide at the university?
Yes, that's 42 properties, but how the number of people who will occupy those properties, is that specified?
No, it's not. But so the landowner, when they put forward the site, will have an expectation of what kind of houses will go on the site. And the main limitation is going to be the number of affordable housing and the affordable housing policies. And everything else is pretty much up for grabs. So if you want to control the kind of housing, the size of the houses, then you do need to do a housing need assessment to prove that there's a shortage of a certain kind of houses in this community that that development should help meet. So we could do a housing need assessment, that's one of the things that we can do at ACOM. And if it proves, for instance, that your young people all have to move away because they couldn't possibly live here because it's so expensive, then you might say, you know, you want to have 30% of the development be 3-bedroom starter homes for young families. If that's what you need, if you can prove that's what you need.
But if you do that, a developer will take that as evidence as well, though, in order to put forward speculative developments and meet a need which hasn't been met.
Yes, but the need is being met on the allocated site. So, but you can put forward, as I said, you can put forward your own proposal for just 100% affordable if you want. If you can find somebody who will get you the land at the right price, which some places do. So think about that when we get to opportunities, okay? Because right now, I'm going to make you do this exercise. So strengths. It's not overdeveloped, and Badbury Park is an example of overdevelopment, but it was allowed on appeal, and that's, everybody hated it, but it was allowed on appeal. So what else do you like about living here?
Access to the countryside, walking.
Okay, what else?
Most people can walk their kids to primary school.
Do you have a primary school?
We do.
Yeah, well, that's good.
But it isn't always walked to.
No.
90% of people tend to take their cars there.
Well, and you need to understand why they do that. Is it because they're dropping their kids off on their way to work?
Yeah, but it doesn't help in terms of access to other people, for other people.
Okay, so that's not a planning matter,
No,
but
I appreciate
it's a
it's all right, I
plan.
appreciate that.
But it's a plan. This is a bad thing too. If the plan identifies safe routes for walking, so that children can walk unaccompanied, then maybe their parents don't need to drive them to school. So, okay, what else is a strength here?
We've got good amenity space, tennis courts, football field.
A strong community spirit as well.
Tennis courts, just a minute, keep that one. Tennis courts, what else? Sports field?
Yeah.
Shops,
Yeah.
Shops,
pubs.
doctors,
Yeah.
no, surgery anyway.
Close access. Close access to the motorway.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
Community spirit. What makes up the community spirit?
I can only speak for myself because I'm in a minute, just over a year that moved in, we had 4 people bring us cards to welcome us to the village. We've never had that before, and I think it speaks volumes to everyone being really welcoming, and people greet you when you walk down the street, and I didn't get that really before, stuff like that. People engage in conversation, and ultimately by evidence of everyone that's turned up, they're very passionate about the locality.
Yeah, good, that's great. Okay, what else do you like about living here?
Question to the parish council. Does everybody know in the room what they want to do behind Hodson Road?
Behind.
Behind the back of Hodson Road.
You mean the rec road?
Where there's a room, planned to be drawn up for a bump track and a road.
Well, there's no plans being drawn up at all yet, but we are looking at using...
Yes, I'd just like to know if everybody in the room are aware of what is being talked about.
Well,
It's published everywhere, so
yeah,
if
it's on all we have a committee which is on the website, and the minutes of that committee you can look at every month. But it is at this moment in time totally speculative. Nothing's been drawn up. We have no land there. We are looking to make a better facility for the community with a larger community centre that you can all access should you need to, and older children can access, and just making a better facility for the village. But to be absolutely honest, at the moment it's a pipe dream. We're looking for ideas. If anybody's got any, please come to the
Well,
meetings.
let's call that an opportunity, because we are
Yeah.
going to get to opportunities.
Please come to the meetings. They're
At
advertised.
the moment, we've had so many meetings, Itbutts Road, Council? Is it
Well,
allowed-
yes, because there's COVID.
We've all been
We've
sick.
all been ill.
We've been ill.
Oh, right. You're long.
Sorry about that.
Okay, strengths.
It's quiet and there's wildlife.
What kind of wildlife?
Yeah, eat all your flowers.
Squirrels. Dig all your flowers up.
Sorry?
Squirrels.
Yeah,
You've got
yeah.
just about everything.
Dig up the tulips and
Good
pumpkins,
selection.
chestnuts.
Okay, what else? Strengths.
The houses are all very different and nothing the same.
So is there like a general, I'm sorry, I did come in the dark. Is there like a general design here, or is it just center is old and then the stuff around it is newer?
Yeah.
Generally, yeah.
There's a lot of local history as well.
Oh, yeah.
There's a conservation area in the heart of the village as well.
We are set right in the middle of the Marlborough Downs. We have a castle opposite.
Oh, yeah. Well, two castles, really.
Bridington.
Both sides.
You haven't seen it?
Two castles.
Two
Yeah.
castles.
Well, you've got some special ancient monuments I saw. Is that what you mean?
Earthworks.
They were earthworks
They're
because
Iron Age.
they were wooden castles.
Yeah, that's something. Okay, that's all very cool. Now there's a Sustrans route. Does that do anything for you?
It's a good path from here to Coatwater.
Quite heavily used.
Yeah.
Right to Marlborough.
Yeah.
Out to Marlborough.
You can cycle to Marlborough.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, on the
Completely
road.
off-road.
Be better if it was a railway line.
Wonderful.
And actually, doesn't it go directly into town? Is it linked up through now?
No, not quite.
Not quite.
Not quite. You still got to go over a bank, but you don't get into the town.
Very good.
Pretty good sign.
Too bad when you get to Marlborough, you have to go downhill.
Yeah.
Coming
Okay.
back is the problem.
Any other strengths?
No crime.
No crime, that's really good, isn't it?
Paul? Paul, is there
Oh,
any crime?
low crime, okay.
Slow crime.
I'm being questioned here. I'm our Neighbourhood Watch coordinator. There is crime. On average, we're looking at around 150 incidents per year within the parish. And that information is freely available to anybody on the Wiltshire Police website.
How much of it is at the petrol station?
Yeah.
I know we laugh about the motorway being so close, but we are.
Very accessible.
We're very accessible and linked to, very easily linked to, by train and by road.
Where do you get the train?
In the town, we don't get it from here, but it's what, 10 minutes into the station, and then you can get to anywhere you
So
want.
which station? You don't have a station
Swindon.
here. Swindon, yeah.
Station. But then it's an hour to London.
Used to have a station.
Yeah.
It's in Station Road, wasn't it?
Now it's a bar shop.
Well, yeah, that was the shop on the platform.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I'm not sure. I would actually disagree. I'm not sure that is a strength, being an access motorway, because it's actually also a weakness. Because it actually
Put
makes
it
us
on
more,
as weakness,
it makes us more encourages people to want to come here. Which is
Yeah.
a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of, do most people work far away? Do they get in their cars in the morning and drive away and come back?
Not the moment, no.
Before COVID?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
We're not quite a dormitory town.
No.
You're not a dormitory.
Not
No,
Okay,
no.
I think that's the strength, actually.
Mm.
So where do people work here?
Oh, there's
Bristol.
there's a lot of industry in Swindon.
Was.
So
You work in Swindon,
And it's new coming.
Newbury, Reading,
London.
And anywhere on the M4 corridor.
yeah.
Yeah.
Bristol.
My dining room. That's right.
Okay.
Can I just say, Washpool, I think is quite unique and special.
Yeah.
I know it's part of nature and
Yeah.
wildlife.
That's it from nature reserve itself.
It's the old village. It's the old village.
Good trip.
Or they knocked it down for the railway.
Washpool is the old village.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. How, tell me about how that works.
It's a wildlife area now.
So what happened
With
to
the
the
village,
village?
the
Railway
railway came
knocked it
through.
down.
The railway came through. and it
You
knocked
guys are
down
gonna have to
the
explain all this. Okay, all right, okay. That's the strength. Weaknesses. So it was the M4, brings people here.
Yes, it is.
Through traffic, following lorries especially.
So you get rat running.
Yeah.
What, on what roads?
The main road, itself.
346?
Yeah.
Okay, and
Well,
No, that's the main road, the B4005.
Yeah.
B,
4005.
Yeah.
Got an
When the M4 is-
unapproved
Yeah.
industrial organisation outlet using over at the hangars. The council actually served notice for them to cease trading, cease doing what they were doing, and they've carried on and it's gone to appeal. But that's been going on for over 2 years now.
It comes up in May.
Oh, there's a new planning commission's going in.
The new planning commission.
so you have an industrial estate, have you?
No.
No, it's not in the parish, it's on, but they travel through
This
the
is
parish to
in-
get to it.
Okay, okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I mentioned, you've done right in that bit. The average age of households in the village is probably higher than the local average, I guess. My worry is in 30 years,
That's the best way to do it.
there's going to be a lot of, they need young blood.
Yeah. Did everyone hear that? That you need some young blood? It's like this everywhere. Every place that's nice, no young people can afford to live.
Which means our school will close eventually because we won't
Yeah.
have kids to go to it.
Yeah, yeah.
HGV, same time, that's a weakness, I think, in the business.
HGV Center, what's that?
It's a test
centre.
HDV
So
test
they
centre.
do the drug testing is done.
Like a camp, children camp.
Their lorries are always empty and well behaved.
While they're being tested, you'd
Yes,
expect
you'd
so.
hope so, yeah.
What other weaknesses?
Safety for pedestrians.
Yeah,
Yes, lack of
lack of
Paths.
safe crossings.
And the large lorries going up on the pavement.
Speeding, there's quite a lot of speeding.
That all sounds really quite important, all of this, sort of lorries on the pavements, and do you get a lot of people parking on the pavements?
Yes. Yes.
Road.
It's not just lorries, it's not.
Lack of traffic calming.
You moan about the lorries making a noise now, if you put traffic calming in, and they has a lot more noise
Actually,
bouncing over them.
the lorries actually control the speed of the traffic quite
Yeah,
well.
that's very good.
I know, it's a,
Okay, any other weaknesses?
Well, it's being fixed soon, but broadband is terribly slow.
But it's gonna be fixed, I'll put it down.
Yeah, it's in the process of being
All right.
fixed, so I wouldn't bother putting that on.
What about, do you have any weaknesses around biodiversity, natural environment being threatened, anything
Only
about?
by planners.
Huh?
Only by planners.
So I didn't hear that, but I knew something bad about planners.
Only by planners.
Oh, only by planners. How do planners ruin the environment?
It's the large developments that sort of concern us. And recently there was a plan to put over 600 houses just across the road from here, which is a huge development for the size of the village, really.
But that's not been included in the local
No,
plan.
I know it hasn't, but it provoked a lot of interest
Oh,
and
yes.
meetings.
But it also represents as a weakness if our planning department is under-resourced, as it is. So therefore, inevitably, there are problems with regard to planning enforcement and the management of retrospective planning applications, some of which have certainly been questionable.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we heard that there was a weakness. Nobody's actually said, I'm the one who keeps talking about affordable housing. Is there a problem with affordable housing?
Yes.
And who is it for? Who can't afford to live here?
Anyone who's not got 400 grand
Yeah.
for a mortgage.
The younger generation, so you're looking at people in their mid-20s who've only just maybe started out at uni, started out in a career or something. They just haven't got the money for it.
Actually, even some older people who are lower down the earnings.
I think it's more affordable housing. The council think to give affordable housing to people who are out and people who can't afford the housing.
That's a bit of a generalisation.
There's only 4 there. Yeah.
So do you know of anybody who's like tried to live here, like any of your children or second generation, but couldn't and had to move
Yes.
away? Okay, so can you tell me about that?
Someone I know has bought a house with a friend of theirs in the village. They've just recently sold and now he's looking to buy on his own and he's been priced out. He has to move away from the village. He's been here 6 or 7 years and now he can't afford to live here anymore. So he's looking anywhere and everywhere really. That
Okay.
offers some of the similar facilities and green space, but it's pretty challenging.
So does anybody else feel that's
No.
typical?
Yes.
I struggled when we were looking to buy a year ago.
Yeah, I agree, I think that's typical.
Would
Okay.
disabled housing for individuals with disabilities come under that as well? There's not enough housing for people who are wheelchair bound or anything to that effect, maybe?
So, sounds to me like a housing need assessment would be helpful.
There's a limited number of bungalows generally in the village.
Well, also you sometimes find that like older people who are living in really big houses might want to actually move to somewhere smaller, but they don't want to give up all of their friends and connections and everything that's familiar and move somewhere else. You know, they want to stay locally, but they just can't. So I think I'm going to do a housing need assessment.
Yeah, I mean, an example of that, the estate I live on, it is people, most of the people on the estate actually bought it when it was new. And as the children have grown up and left home, they're still living in it. And I'm sure given an opportunity to move to something as nice but smaller, they probably
More
would.
manageable,
There's
yeah.
nothing falls in that category.
Yeah, which is the kind of policy you can have to say that, you know, these new houses have to cater for that. So let's do a housing need assessment, because we can have that done through ACOM. Okay, opportunities.
Can I just point out a major weakness?
Yeah?
Swindon Borough Council seem to have absolutely zero strategic review or planning ability, and building on greenfield sites rather than brownfield ones. So I do think that's a rather major weakness that we have.
Well, the point is I haven't gone through the whole rationale for why they chose that site. But they probably felt that they had to not just have everything be in the new eastern villages. They probably thought that you guys needed to have a little bit of scope to grow, and that's probably why they said that you needed to have some housing here. So what's wrong with that? Why is that zero strategic vision?
I'm not talking about the eastern villages, I'm talking about Winchestone stated that in the last 20 years. I'm talking about the lack of building on Dorking. There's so many brownfield sites, they promised not to build beyond Tadpole Lane. They broke that
Oh, I
promise.
see.
It's all over. Look at the town centre, it's dead.
Many town centers are
100
dead.
million more, and it's
Yeah.
not being used, it's dead. Oasis, you know, what's happened with that? So I think I've proven a few points.
No money.
Borough Council's lack of strategic review.
Okay.
They don't have the skills, and
Does
I
it-
think we're all affected by that. Yeah.
It's really funny because I work in planning departments all around, and Swindon's one of my favorite. Actually, God, it's worse elsewhere. It's local government has just had the stuffing knocked out of it, and there's just not enough people to do it. And also, I think people who choose planning as a career end up working for the private sector because it's a lot more dynamic and a lot more fun and better paid. So they can't get staff either. It's just dreadful now in planning departments and local government.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not pointing the finger at planners. It's been decades, hasn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
building out of the orbital, build a bit for the outer village, build a bit here, a bit there. Where's the centre? Where's the culture?
We don't own the centre any longer, that's all been sold off to developers.
Brilliant.
I didn't sell it. I think it was the other colour.
Okay. So opportunities. I didn't write it down, but I know what you're saying, so I'll remember it. Opportunities.
In terms of what we want.
You were talking about
With the recreation.
A new community centre.
a community center.
We're looking to breathe some new fresh air into the village.
And what's going to go in the community center?
We would have, come along now, help us. We'd have
More sport, indoor sports,
a computer room in there, room for groups to meet.
young people for clubs and things like that.
There will be catering facilities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, people could hire it for weddings, that sort of thing.
So how do you want to
Parties.
plan, how do you want to pay for that? Because you could ask this development to put a
Oh, we
significant
will do.
contribution. So that's one of the things you want then?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're looking at external funding, obviously, because we don't have money to pay for it.
No,
We're
okay,
working on
okay, okay. Right, so that's really important.
Yes, especially as the current facilities we have are,
Falling apart.
well, they're beyond their natural lifespan.
And can you prove that?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
We've replaced the walls, we've replaced the ceiling, we've replaced the floors, we've replaced the door, and then it didn't fit, so we had to have a new frame to fit the door in. Oh, yeah, we've had fun.
Okay.
Are you talking about the church hall?
No, we're talking about the little
Recreational hall.
recreation hall on the rec field.
Oh,
Oh, no, the church hall's wonderful. But that's the churches.
I'm surprised we didn't get
But it's
sued
open
after.
for use by the village.
Absolutely, and we do use it, you know we do.
So why do we need anything else?
Because if you got
Older
42 more
children.
houses, if you've got 42 new houses, that's just 42 houses worth of people that need some place to meet.
Everything else
You don't want the 42.
Well, you can't stop it from happening, you might not want it, but the whole point of this exercise is to make it not have a negative impact. So if you do nothing, if you have all of your community facilities are in inadequate buildings, or there's not enough of them, and 42 houses, that's another 150 people in the village?
Well, perhaps it's more about where it actually is.
The
And
housing.
The site that you propose is a beautiful vantage point right over to the Cotswolds, which we love and enjoy and we will lose. It's also directly adjacent to the path that we're talking about going, the cycle path that goes to Morber and Swindon, and that's going to affect that. And I think people that use that path for quiet country walks are going to lose that. So it's probably more to do with where it is, apart from anything.
I don't think we can argue about the site. I think the site is already agreed and those houses are going on there. There's nothing we can do about that.
So what we can do is to make sure the houses don't get too close.
To shape the
To
development
make
that
sure
gets
we
put on
get,
there.
as I said before, sooner than have it done to us, we'll make sure it's, if we have to have it, we have some input into it. Otherwise, we'll end up with a Badbury Park.
Yeah. If it's a bad, we've got to make it the least worse.
If you cast your minds back to 2-3 years ago, we was really fighting as a parish council because they wanted to build on them 2 fields, and what we was lucky to get just the corner of the village. And they've gone away for now, but I think it will come back
Yeah.
and hit us.
So if this is with us and that's not inside it, then that gives us more strength.
I think I'm hearing the parish council, and it's a done deal, unfortunately, as much as you might not like it. And I guess we're here to affect things like footways, cycle paths, to make it more bearable, and to actually make sure these people integrate properly into the village, it isn't Badbury Park.
Well, I think what we've got to think about is Home Close, I don't know, when was that built? Back in the
1982.
80s? Yeah. That was area of outstanding
farm.
natural beauty, sorry?
It was a farm.
Yeah, well, okay, but it was within, and so therefore, that's a lovely area and it's pleasant to walk through, and so long as we can ensure that the standard is at least as good as that, and hopefully better, because obviously things have come on since then, you know, that's probably, as you say, that's what we're here for.
Can I just ask, please? In terms of using the neighbourhood plan in order to try and set some requirements or parameters on these 42 new homes, which seems to be the key focus of the union, what happens when the developer who's sitting behind those 42 homes, and it won't be the landowner, I think it'll be
No,
the
it won't be.
developer, when they submit a planning application before the local plan gets close to being adopted, or before this neighbourhood plan ever gets close to being made. And so it's all determined by Swindon Council Planning Department, and they make the determination because the neighbourhood plan isn't in a position to affect it. So what would then be your plan?
Have you seen how long these planning applications take to go through?
Yeah, I do them for a living.
I understood that the forthcoming plan is also taken into account.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Certainly as a parish council, we can feed back to the SPC essentially the contents of the plan. It may not get the full weight, but it'll get some weight.
It will,
It'll get limited. It'll get limited.
It will, let me,
If
so first
your
of all,
concern is on the basis of agreeing a 42 house allocation in the local plan, because that's what you had to do, because that's the only way that Swindon Council are going to listen to you. If you're then now saying that actually, if we can prepare a neighbourhood plan, then the council will have, the district council will have to listen to us on that basis. I think you're mistaken. They won't listen to you.
I think, he's correct, but I don't agree with it. It's not hopeless. Okay, it's not perfect. Planning is not perfect. And he's absolutely right. So if there's no 5-year housing land supply, then the applicant, if they get a refusal, can go to appeal, and the planning inspectorate is pretty much instructed, yeah, you're supposed to permit it. However, it's in the AONB. So I don't know if this site is in the AONB, but
Yes.
it is. Okay. So that is really strong in your favor. The fact that the neighborhood plan will be starting to gather evidence about the need for community infrastructure, the desirability of the improvement of the cycling footpath network. We've got all of these emerging policies here. That evidence can still be brought to bear in any planning argument and in any series of objections. And as the neighborhood plan starts to take shape, that evidence will exist, and that evidence will be contrary to whatever the proposer or the applicant is putting forward. And there is an argument to be had. Now, a neighborhood plan has no great significant weight until it's almost at the referendum stage. However, every time it goes through a public consultation, so the first one will be Regulation 14 consultation, then once it's gone past that period and the responses have been analyzed, it will have some limited weight. Not much, but some limited weight. So the fact that you've got the AONB and the fact that you've got the neighborhood plan evidence base, and you've got quite a lot of policies in the Swindon, the adopted plan that are very helpful to, means that the parish council will be able to build up a compelling case to, seek adjustments in any proposal that might come forward, even in the face of no 5-year housing land supply. That's what I think. So,
yeah. Also, I think if we look at it sensibly, we can make life very difficult for them. We really can. If they come up with something that we really don't like, firstly, the parish would look at it, and if they didn't approve, they would put in an objection. I'm sure everyone sat in this room would put in an objection. That's all taken into consideration. It has to go through highways, it has to go through conservation. Now, conservation, love it. I mean, they will take it forever. So we build up a strong enough case against what they're putting in. I'm not saying they won't be able to build there, but we can make it jolly difficult for them. So they want to work with us. So this is why, if we know what we want, we can sell that to them, And if they don't play ball, then frankly, nor do we.
But, you know, the whole point is to try to create an environment where you can have a reasonable discussion between the parties. And you can try for everybody to, because a lot of objections from the parish council cost the developer money because it costs a delay in the application process. So in the grand scheme of things, it might help the developer to actually work constructively with the community, because they'll probably get a better looking development that's easier to sell, and also it will probably be a faster process. So hopefully any developer will be willing to have a sensible conversation in the AONB in the absence of a neighborhood plan. So is that kind of the main opportunity? Obviously, I think all of the opportunity for everything here. I'm not hearing it from you guys. That affordable housing is another opportunity, I think.
What about bungalows? If we're saying that people, can't leave their large houses because they can't find suitable, affordable accommodation, and then a lot of these people are older in their years and they're looking for bungalows. They're not looking for houses. So if the site, and there are not many bungalows being built these days, so if it has bungalows, then people within the village can stay in the village.
So what do you say, housing mix and bungalows?
It allows people to move up the process so that it frees up bigger houses.
It frees up the houses for other people with families. Yeah. And also a decent playing area for children. It seems to be in the village, the playground locally seems to be absolutely abysmal to me. I have grandchildren who come and visit all the time and they struggle like hell with it. We could take them to play peacefully. Sorry? It's terrible.
Just to make you aware, in fact, the parish council has invested many thousands of pounds on the Castleview play area. You may find it, unsatisfactory, but it's just to let you know.
Compared to other sites in Swindon, it's pretty poor.
Yeah, I think the other sites in Swindon actually accommodate features that are also suitable for older children, which I think in themselves actually make the whole site.
For a range of ages, yeah.
Which is what we're looking at.
It's pretty,
because
it's not much
we
there.
realise that.
If you look at most of those areas, they benefited from an influx of houses which have paid for those.
Sure. Well, this is our opportunity.
Yeah.
So exactly. So I wrote that down as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Is there the question of the accommodation in the school? If you're having 42 new houses, say there's going to be another 80 odd children, the school is already struggling in terms of its accommodation. It's had to use porta cabins and God knows what else to actually accommodate the children. Is the opportunity now to get a better school somewhere else in the village?
So that is probably more than the neighborhood plan can do. So that would be something that the education authority would have to address. Now, in my experience, because I often, usually most of the neighborhood plans I do, it's the same situation. Community gets a strategic allocation. Oh my God, what are we going to do? This is totally normal. So what I usually do is I don't say anything about schools, and then when I do the Regulation 14 consultation, which is the first one, then the education authority writes me with a big long paragraph that they want me to stick in, because I left it out. So that's how I usually do it, because then if they want it, then they can do it. But they are the ones that have to prove at the planning application stage that housing is required and that development needs to put money towards it. So that's like way above my pay grade as a neighborhood planner.
I think there's an opportunity for any new houses to be more environmentally friendly, eco-friendly, etc.
Yeah, I think we've got to look ahead of the climate change thing, so making sure they use sustainable heating, whatever. So perhaps no gas or whatever.
What about self-build?
So there is a requirement to make provision for self-build. Do you think anybody's going to want to do self-build here? I'll just put it in.
The opportunity made now.
I think that, so a lot of this will come out of a housing need assessment, which will give us that evidence. Okay, I'm losing my audience here, so. I'm not gonna do threats, because I think you guys will tell me. So, what time is it here? Right, oh, we're moving on. So, the policies I had in mind were, from what you're telling me. So, as I said, a master plan for, LA 22. It sounds like you guys want to have what's called a housing mix policy. So that's that whole issue of, is it for young people? Is it for older people? Is it bungalows? What's the housing market here like? What do we need? What does affordable actually mean here? So I'm going to say housing mix policy. There's a lot of stuff in this plan about footpaths and cycleways. So do you want I think, sustainable transport policy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's walking and cycling. Walking and cycling. Well, you're not going to get a new train station here, so.
Wouldn't mind a light rail.
Look at the train station road to put the railway back.
Light rail, whatever you guys, if we could have light rail everywhere, that would be wonderful. Oh, it would be wonderful. What about the natural environment? Is there anything that planning needs to do to protect the natural environment here?
I think ANOB already does.
Well, I think there's still those guidelines we can put in about.
What about biodiversity improvements and all of that?
Yeah.
I think sites need to be listed to be kept as green sites.
That and bird boxes.
Whether the water infrastructure can actually cope with increased demand on water and the increased demand on sewage.
Again, in allocating the site, the Swindon Council should have checked that. So I've just written down a policy on biodiversity, because I think that's really, really important as we move forward. It's really, really important. And I also wrote down local green spaces where we can actually identify and protect spaces inside the settlement area that need to be protected in the long term so they don't get moved over to housing later on. Like
Also, I call it housing density.
A design code.
Yeah, kind of, because I mean, if you look at certain areas of North Swindon, they actually paved everything from one house across to the next house. No parking spaces or anything like that, so you go down there at the weekend, you can't get anything down the middle of the road because there's cars everywhere, and there's nowhere for families, for gardens or anything.
It's just good for instance for that.
So sort of density with reasonable greens around the houses and parking.
Maybe design codes for how the appearance of the actual properties would be in whatever form they would be.
Yes. So I don't like to be too prescriptive with these things because, you know, my taste might not be somebody else's taste. But there's a lot that you can do with design codes, and the government has put together lots of new policies and approaches that we're supposed to look at. And design is no longer just about paint color. It's now about connectivity and the space between buildings and the density and everything that we've just talked about. So you can do quite a lot with a design policy. And the beauty of a neighborhood plan is you only have to do as much as you want to do. So you don't have to, you know, do something really super elaborate. If something simple will do the trick.
We had a comment earlier about thatched houses. In fact, we actually had a planning application in Badbury where half the houses would be thatched.
Wow.
So, you know, maybe it isn't so far-fetched.
Yeah. If you can go back to that applicant and talk to them about their development costs, because it's such an unusual requirement.
Yeah.
I met somebody who lived in a thatched house, and he said it was the toastiest, warmest house he ever lived in. And he said it wasn't that expensive to do the roof.
No.
Yeah.
So I was surprised.
Yeah, it is expensive to do.
So he was a financial manager, so he probably didn't think it was maybe.
I think thatched houses are better to live across the road from them and look
Oh,
at.
right, okay. Yes. When I moved here, I looked at lots of listed buildings, and they all had little tiny rooms with little tiny windows. So I thought, 60s isn't so bad, actually.
Can I ask something quickly?
Sure.
Could you put in any ask rather than a requirement that they employ people in the local area, if where possible? Is that out of scope?
That's not planning policy, so it's not
No,
land
that's
use and
fair enough.
development.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair enough.
Would that include a thing, for example, code of the area that what people are allowed to do to their property that they purchase. So, for example, I've lived in areas where people can't put a satellite dish up, they can't put a basketball.
So you've got a conservation area, which I hope has a conservation area management plan or statement.
It does, yeah.
Is it? Okay. So that's going to determine what happens there. So you can't be too prescriptive because people have to get on with their lives, you know. But you can certainly, I mean, look, I'm super pragmatic. I'm not going to let you do anything that you're not going to be able to do. So you guys come up with whatever crazy ideas you want, and I'll tell you if you can do it or not. That's my answer on that, because we haven't gotten there yet. So I think that's actually, so that's a policy for the application site, housing mix, just so we understand what kind of housing we need. Walking and cycling policy, biodiversity policy, local green spaces, and a design code. That's plenty. That's plenty.
Just to clarify something, we can't affect traffic flow or anything like that, can we?
It's a real bugbear for me.
No, we can't really. But all you can do is try to enlist the support of the Highways Authority.
Yeah, we've done
The problem is that their hands are tied too. Everybody's hands are tied. So you just have to work with what you've got. And I'm afraid stopping everyone else from having a car so that we can all drive freely is just not something I want to do.
No, it's the stream of HGVs going through. You've got 3 in a row
Yeah.
doing 30 mile an hour past the house. It's like on a freight train.
Yeah, I know. I do have, I used to, for my sins, I used to be the technical services manager for Hills Waste. So I do know about lorries. So we can talk to the Highways Authority about perhaps having voluntary lorry routing agreements or something. But that's not neighborhood plan.
Anything voluntary on the train doesn't work.
That can include the truck school as well, so that would be good. Because
Well, again, it's not part of the neighborhood plan.
right, okay.
But, I could help you write a letter.
They'd have a license for as long as,
Yeah.
Well, actually,
it's
they don't have a
difficult.
license.
No, I don't
trucks
No,
do.
not at the moment,
No.
they are. They're
There
not,
are so many.
not,
Well, I mean,
Earthline don't.
no, I'm talking about the HGV training place.
Oh, the training.
Yeah, then.
Okay, this is the last exercise, and then you guys can either go to the bar and have a lovely drink on your way out, or you can go home and watch television, or get warm again. Oh, sorry, you had a question?
Yes, please. I'm sorry to be a pain, but you mentioned threats. I don't particularly want to talk about threats, but what kind of threats should we be aware of?
I think you've listed them, really. The problem with the SWOT analysis is I never do the T part, because by the time I've actually got there, I've heard what you've said. I've heard about the lorries. I've heard about the primary school. I've heard about the fact that there's no affordable housing here. I've heard about the fact that you don't want this development here, that it's taking away a nice view. And I've heard about the fact that it's right next to the Sus-Trans route. And that's why Swindon Council, put in that little bit about picnic benches. And it says quite specifically that the development can't have anything at that part of the site, obviously because of the view.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you think you could have a phasing policy?
For 42 houses, we might. We'll have to see. Yeah, we could have a phasing policy. We'll have to see what the master plan throws out. The phasing means that you say that you have to build this part of the site first, and then you can't do the next part until that part's finished. That's what
Or
it is.
require the houses to be built at the end of the 2036 period.
Yeah, you can put them later, but we can look at phasing. Let's just see what the master plan comes up with, and I hope you're going to be on our working party.
Who's going to do the master plan, sorry?
I will probably do it with you. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. Just let me. So the way I approach master plans is I literally just I would start with LA 22 and go into a lot more detail based on what everybody in the community says about what that means, and then whatever else the community requires on that. And so, the definition, it's all pretty wishy-washy in here. So if we can actually, pin it down on a map, but we have to talk to the landowner or the proposer to make sure that they can actually deliver it. Because we can't do anything in the neighborhood plan that the proposer cannot afford to do. So there's all sorts of, I'm not gonna explain it all to you guys, but basically, as an incentive to get houses built, Forest wants 300 houses per annum, so pretty much there's a profit margin built in that says that the developer is supposed to be able to walk away with a reasonable profit. It's called viability, and that's there as an incentive so that the private sector actually builds the houses that are required so that somebody will invest their money, because they're gonna have to spend their money to build the 42 houses before the houses get sold and they make a profit. So if what we do makes that too expensive, like they're all thatched cottages, and it turns out that thatched cottages are 30% more expensive than other kinds of sustainable development homes, then we've got a problem. The way that we work that through is hopefully, if the site owner wants to work with us, what we're doing in the master plan, great, but they usually don't. And then when we get to regulation 14, then they will give us a whole long list of why everything we said in the policy is absolutely rubbish and it all has to be taken out. And then it's my job as a skilled planner to argue why it needs to stay in, or to accept that they were right and I need to change the wording. So that's how it works. It's a negotiation that happens across these different consultations.
So to move to a practical vision, I think it would be very helpful if we could have a clear idea of what all the constraints are to all the things that ideally everyone here would like to do.
Well, so that's all known. So at the end of today, hopefully before Christmas, I'll take this away. I will formally, fully review the policy situation for Swindon. Then I'll write the steering group a report with recommendations of what the steering group needs to do to get the evidence together for these different policies. And then it's really kind of over to you guys to help them get that. So I hope when they ask for volunteers from the community that you guys are actually going to volunteer, because we're going to need to have somebody looking at the cycle routes, and we're going to need to talk to, I guess you're with Wiltshire Wildlife Trust here, talk about the biodiversity improvements or whatever is going to be required here in this parish. So I will prepare that report, I will do that policy review, and then it's really very iterative. Then what usually happens is you guys start giving me all your evidence, and then I start writing draft policies, and then you say you like it or you don't like it, you want this in, you want that out, whatever, And we kind of agree it, and then hopefully we'll be able to talk to the Swindon planners about whether they agree that that's an appropriate approach or not. And that's why you need to have a professional helping you who's done this before, because I speak the language.
Could I ask you that? Do you have any examples, either of your own or others, where a neighbourhood plan has dramatically altered what was coming in to the benefit of the local community?
Oh yeah, sure, that's what the whole point is.
But it'd just be useful to see like actual photos of what they've built.
Oh, no, I haven't gotten that far with them. No, I haven't gotten that far with them. No, I've had 3 neighborhood plans, because it's not been around that long.
Okay.
But the difference is, if you do this, you can actually get a much better development that's not completely generic. That's the whole point. And then it actually links to what your community already has and what you want to make better. So it's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
South Marston, they really had what was trying to be done to them. They didn't want the building over there. But by working with their neighbourhood plan, which they had in place, and with the developers, they got so much more of what they wanted, really so much more. And the planning chair over there, actually I've spoken to her, and she pushed really, really hard. This is what I'm saying. It is a negotiation. Obviously, you have all the real knowledge, but we have the knowledge of the area and what
good
we
here,
want. And really, it's going to be a debate, no matter what happens. But I, for one, am quite determined they don't walk all over us.
But it will give them a better development, it'll be easier to sell. Because it'll be a better place that people will think, oh gosh, this is wonderful, I want to live here. And these houses look like they're going to last. I'm doing the Salisbury neighborhood plan, and I drive past Tidworth. And oh my God, they put in some really inexpensive housing there. And after 2 years, it already looks like it's 10 years old. and that's, build quality is a really important thing, actually.
What do you see as the key threats to us not achieving a neighbourhood plan? Have you seen things go wrong before?
I'm a really good project manager, and my neighborhood plan, well, all of them but one has gone through. So the risk is that you guys don't do the next step, which is I'm going to give you lots of jobs to do. If you don't do those jobs, then you won't give me any evidence that I can't write any policies. That's the risk. Once you're past that stage and you've given me all my input, then I promise you it will finish as fast as possible.
So we need volunteers.
You need volunteers who are going to do stuff, yeah. And I'll help you with that as well. I'll help you have to find projects for people to go out and do, and, give me this by such and such a date, do it this way, here's an example.
What period of time does the next stage roughly take? How long are we going to be asking people?
If you guys work really, really hard, we can get it done in 6 months.
Okay.
If you faff about, it'll take a year.
Do we have anybody who's interested in being on the working party here now? Before we lose you, thank you.
Okay, if you could not leave the room until you've given your name and
Absolutely.
email address, that's great.
Because this is where you have the knowledge of what you want, and we can, as long as we're all singing from the same hymn sheet at the end of the day, we'll win. We'll get what we want.
Yeah.
Would it be best if people emailed Claire with their details, and we can set up something?
Okay, I'm not done with you yet, so we're going to do one more exercise.
Can we put in an eco policy?
I've put one in, biodiversity, yeah, and one on, yes.
Fine.
Good. Okay, in 2036, because that's when the Swindon plan, next plan ends, what is Chiselden going to be like? It's going to be a place where...
What houses?
Where people want to live in a healthy, thriving village.
I hope with the same or more facilities than
Yes.
we've got now.
Yes.
In terms of
More
shops and meeting
diversified
places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want to be swallowed up.
And better infrastructure.
We need a 20-foot wall along the M4 that no SPC officers can climb over.
Junction 15, let's just close it, yeah?
Very nice.
Stop the world!
Some are very nice.
Very nice.
Yeah, okay, so put up a wall. Okay, we'll have a new castle.
That's on
All right, so I've got people want to live, healthy, thriving village, more diversified ages.
Like looking at every, I don't know, could have been, how the school keep updated, how all the facilities be relevant and up to date for the time. You don't want someone to fall behind the time to be 20 years old then and in drastic need of improvement.
Well, I think it's like anything, if it stands still,
Yeah,
it goes backwards. Because the rest of the world will move without it.
Adapt or die, isn't it, in a harsh time.
Healthy environment,
That's true.
healthy environment. And what, new housing for all sectors of the community?
Yeah.
That
I think you need a good range of ages, from sort of toddlers through to elderly.
We want to avoid becoming a dormitory village as well.
Most definitely, which will happen if we start.
Definitely.
I wish this pen had spell check. Okay, anything else that you want this place to be in 2036?
Would that 10% year-on-year improvements in biodiversity equate to, what, 140% of what it is now, then if we count, is it compounding or what?
Well, no, it's 10%,
Okay.
not of the existing biodiversity, but the biodiversity on that site.
Oh, okay, apologies.
A few residents, we would like the value of our property to change.
Not planning that, but I'm sure it will happen. It will happen, it will happen.
Not in Swindon, it won't.
What was that? The house price, well, they'll all want to move out here because it'll be so lovely. Anything else?
More local businesses.
Yeah.
Right, where would they go? Because we haven't talked about that at all.
We do have a industrial park.
There's two
Within the
industrial
village.
centres.
Two of them,
One
yes.
is by the church, and then there's one just across the field from here.
Yeah.
Do I
They're
need to know
micro
anything
though,
about
aren't they?
that?
They're not big.
No, they're not
huge.
Yeah, yeah,
Quite
they're
a few units.
quite niche.
There's the one in Hodgson as well, very close. The one in Hodgson, Balbury.
Oh, right,
Yeah, sorry,
yes.
Balbury,
Is that
yeah.
in the parish?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, it is.
There's
Yeah.
three, including that
So
one.
are those local jobs filled by local people?
Not
Some of them are.
Probably.
The one in Bladbury isn't.
They're not
Oh, you
shop
still wanna
style.
have all of your hubs and things, don't you? Gosh, of course I do.
Goodness, yes. Goodness, yes.
Oh, they still have local businesses.
In fact, it's got local businesses in local employees.
Okay.
More play areas, because you'll need it if you're gonna.
So we live in a virtual world by then.
Eh?
They'll be connected to the matrix.
Okay. I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna stay here as long as anybody wants to ask questions. You guys have been amazingly patient, and thank you for staying till the end, because I know sometimes these kind of things are a bit, so thanks very much. This is helpful. I'm gonna be able to get really good stuff out of this, so your input has been very valuable, so thank you very much. Any questions?
Development over on the old Halfro site, does that fall within the pack?
Yes.
Yeah.